Yes, this beautiful moth orchid plant is cake. If you want to see how it's done, stay tuned. This is Arise Cake Creations and I'm Sarah. Let's get started. First we'll prepare the cake board. I'm going to do a marble effect on the cake board, so I've taken some grey pieces of fondant and I've mixed in some black and some darker shades of grey and also some white. There's no real direct key to making marble fondant, but the main important thing is not to over knead it. So the way that I tend to do it is actually just intertwine and blend those colours together and just keep twisting and twisting and twisting until I get the desired effect. And then once I'm done, I actually curl it into a ball and then begin rolling the fondant out once I've actually got the desired marbled effect that I want to see. Now I'm using a 12-inch round cake board, so I'm just making sure I roll out the fondant that it's actually big enough to fit over the actual cake board. I actually take a small amount of vegetable shortening or Trex and actually put it onto the cake board and then literally lay the fondant over it and secure it into place. Use a sharp scalpel or a knife to cleanly cut away the excess fondant. I decided I wanted to do a tile effect, so this is actually really easy to do, and it's just creating lines in the fondant and just making squares really to look like the tiles. And I'm just using the edge of my ruler just to make that indentation line in the actual fondant. Now you could actually leave it like this, but just to make it look a bit more realistic and make it look like grouted tiles, if you roll out some thin pieces of fondant, you can actually add it in between the lines that are there. If you've got a sugar gun, it will make the process much easier for you to just squeeze out and actually just lay the fondant into those grooves. I've just used a cake smoother just to make sure the surface is smooth on top. I started off with a 6-inch round cake, and this is actually my perfect chocolate cake. I'll leave a link in the iCard to it. And I'm just using a cake plate that's slightly smaller, which is about 3¼ inches. However, later on I do change that size to be about 3½ inches, a 3½-inch cookie cutter, just so that I can create an oval shape. Just keep carving. It is a bit it might be a bit difficult at first if you've not done carving before. However, this is a good shape to do because it's actually kind of an easy shape to carve. But you do want to start off with a slightly smaller size so that you can actually use that as a guide to help you start getting the curved shape going. And make sure you do both the top and the bottom so that it creates that lovely curve and oval shape. Take your time when carving the cake, don't rush it, just to make sure that you don't cut off too much cake. Also make sure you keep the cake scraps because they're great to be used for popsicles or cake pops. I'm using white chocolate ganache to crumb coat this cake. Now I've got again a ganache recipe that you can follow, so I'll leave a link again in the iCard for that. And once you're done, set it in the fridge for about 20 minutes to firm up before adding your final coat of ganache or buttercream. Add your final coat of ganache. Now I'm using an acetate smoother because it actually is really easy against those curves rather than using an ordinary palette knife. I'm rolling out some white fondant to make sure that it fits the size of the oval cake that I've got now. I should add, I secured my cake to a cake card of about 3½ inches in diameter as well. To make it easier, cut away any excess fondant and then you will need to flip the cake upside down just to make sure that all of the fondant underneath is also smooth and in place as well. I decided that I wanted to have a patterned effect on the fondant itself, on the sides of the cake. So I'm using an old-fashioned bottle opener. It was just the first thing I could find that I thought would create a nice pattern. So you could do the same, or if you have an impression mat that you want to use, then this would be the stage to do it when the fondant is still soft. Use your ganache or buttercream to actually secure the cake to the main cake board. I used the same 3.5-inch cookie cutter just to make an impression on the actual fondant, then used a palette knife to actually cut away the opening for the plant pot. Now in this section here you will need to add some ganache to it to ensure that the cake does not dry out. I created a bamboo stick by doing marbled cream and brown fondant. Then I used a dowel just so that I could cover this with the fondant. Then went on to actually do the markings of a bamboo. Now I actually used my veining tool and other tools and also just my finger just to shape it into position as well. But I also looked online just to see what a bamboo would look like so I could create the effect. Now once you've done that, you need to put it to one side so it fully dries before you dust it with some edible dusts. If you want to know how to make these orchid flowers, you can actually follow the tutorial that I've done. So again, I will leave a link in the iCard for that. I also made some orchid leaves as well. Now I don't have orchid cutters, so these were all cut freehand and wired with some 18 gauge wire. Now I wanted to make sure that this plant looks as realistic as possible, so I actually made some edible moss. It's really easy to make. You don't even need a cake tin. It can be done in a plastic cup and it's done in the microwave. Then transfer the mixture to a plastic cup and microwave for 1 minute 30 seconds on 850 watts. We can use good old Oreos to create the chocolate soil, so get about 6 Oreos, place them into a plastic bag and then just use a rolling pin and literally just crush them until they're fine and mixed together. Add the chocolate soil to the plant pot opening. Once your bamboo stick is completely fully dry, you can use again edible colours just to create a more lifelike and realistic look. I'm using crystal colours in cream and also brown as well. I taped my Gumpaste moth orchids together. Now if you need to see how to do this, you can check out my moth orchid tutorial. I will leave a link in the iCard. Now you shouldn't place wires directly into a cake, so I'm using some straws which the wires will be placed directly into. So the finishing touches can now proceed. So I've added the bamboo stick already and I'm now just adding the flowers. I actually used a 28 gauge wire covered in mid-green florist tape just to help me secure those flowers to the bamboo stick. The edible moss looks so realistic, so take it from your plastic cup and then begin arranging it onto the opening of the cake to make it look more realistic and make it look like it's an actual plant. Then take the leaves, make sure you bend the wire at about a 90-degree angle to actually place it into the cake. Make sure that wire again is going into one of the straws that's inserted into the cake. To To create some vines or roots coming from the plant, I actually just used some 28 gauge wire covered in some mid-green florist tape and arranged it around the base of the plant, and then just moved the leaves around just to make it look more realistic and lifelike. I decided to add some gold flecks to the marble design on the cake board. Now you can do this by mixing some gold edible dust with either some lemon extract or some vodka, and just use a fine paintbrush just to paint in those lines. Now your beautiful realistic moth orchid plant cake is complete. Now if you make this cake, now don't forget to actually share it with me over on Instagram or Facebook, #AriseCakeCreations. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching. See you soon.